My name is Alan Cooper. I'm General Counsel and Claims Director at AMSkier Insurance Agency, where for the past 20+ years, my legal work has been devoted solely to legal compliance and claims issues involving children's camps throughout North America. Sexual harassment takes two common forms. The first one is known as a quid pro quo. The common example being a supervisor who says to somebody who works for him or her, "Do this for me, date me, go out with me, sleep with me, and good things will happen to you at work," or conversely, if you don't, bad things will happen to you. In the camping industry, those kinds of sexual harassment issues are fairly rare based on the short duration, as well as the notion of the supervisory power over subordinates in the workplace. The other kind is known as a hostile work environment, where through somebody's actions, through somebody's words, through somebody's comments, because of visuals that may exist in the workplace, somebody feels that they have a hostile work environment that is based upon some sort of sexual connotations. Understand, sexual harassment, while more often than not is male to female, by law can be male to male, female to female, or female to male as well. The most important concept or difference with sexual harassment compared to other laws is that a subjective standard. What I mean by that is most laws have an objective standard. What would a reasonable person do in these circumstances? What would a reasonable person perceive somebody's actions to be? In sexual harassment, it is entirely different. It is subjective, meaning it is the victim who decides whether or not something constitutes sexual harassment. For example, somebody may hear language or an off-color joke or comments about his or her appearance and find them to be non-offensive. Others may hear things like that and find that to create a hostile work environment if they are based on sexual appearance, sexual identity, sexuality, anything having to do with gender, differences between male and female, anything of that nature. That's why it becomes so difficult in the workplace, and especially in the camp setting, to address the hostile work environment types of sexual harassment. In the children's camp setting, unlike a traditional workplace such as an office or a restaurant or a warehouse, we have a set of employees who may be 100, 200, 300, 20-somethings coming for 7, 8, or 9 weeks to an informal setting, wearing shorts, wearing tank tops, wearing bathing suits, and we have to convey the notion that any form of sexual harassment is not tolerated at this place of employment, and to convince those that while it may be informal, it does remain a place of employment where all the rules apply. The best way to prevent sexual harassment in the children's camp setting is to, from the beginning, create a culture at your camp where everyone understands that sexual harassment will not be tolerated in any form. That must start during orientation and must continue throughout the summer. Training must include the concept that victims of sexual harassment are not only permitted to, but are encouraged to come forward, as we don't want people working in an environment where they're looking over their shoulders, where they're uncomfortable, and where they're not able to work up to their full capacity, not to mention potential legal exposure for an employer. There are a number of ways to do this, depending upon the procedures that you'd like to employ at your camp. Some camps say it's perfectly acceptable for you to go to this perpetrator, to the person who's making you feel uncomfortable, and tell them to stop. Knock it off. Don't speak that way in front of me. Don't touch me in that manner. And leave it at that, and if it happens again, report the matter to supervisory personnel. There are some camps that don't want their staff members doing that they want any form of sexual harassment to be reported to them and only to them. And some prefer a hybrid. Please tell the perpetrator to knock it off, to stop, but let us know as well so that we can keep an eye on things. Whichever one you choose, it is also important to recognize that the supervisor involved cannot be limited to one person, such as only the camp director, but must have multiple layers of people who the victim can speak to, because he or she may not feel comfortable reporting it to a specific person. But that culture must be enforced, not only beginning, but throughout the camp setting. The other issue to be involved is the form of sexual harassment which can take place away from camp and can unfortunately often rise to the level of sexual assault. It is again important from the beginning to make clear to all of your staff members where that danger position lies. And what I mean by that is when you go out with people who you do not know very well, just because you think you know them does not make you safe. Nearly every form of sexual assault that will take place at a summer camp will not involve a stranger. It'll involve somebody who the victim thinks that he or she knew, and in almost every circumstance, alcohol and/or drugs are going to be involved. This applies not only to potential victims, but to the potential perpetrators. When you have that much to drink, understanding where that line falls between where somebody can give meaningful consent to a sexual encounter and where somebody, because of their level of intoxication or being altered in some other manner, cannot give meaningful consent. If that line is crossed and you have sex with that person, you have committed a crime. That makes you a rapist. So understanding those danger points and explaining to your staff the consequences that go along with engaging in sexual encounters which may rise to that level of sexual assault. Those are, in addition to being forms of sexual harassment, those are crimes in every jurisdiction. When faced with a complaint of sexual harassment, it is important for the person receiving the complaint to let the victim know you are glad that he or she came forward and that you will do what you can to prevent it from happening again. From there, you would perform a simple investigation. That might include speaking to the perpetrator and any witnesses who may have been present. And from there, make a decision as to what you would like to do. If it is the type of sexual harassment that is of a subjective nature, meaning something that may be offensive to one but not offensive to others, you still need to let the perpetrator know what he or she has done and that conduct is not acceptable in the future. And if it happens again, that person is gone. If it rises to the level of activity for which no types of second chances are involved, you're perfectly within your rights to terminate the person at that particular point. When dealing with a complaint involving off-campus sexual harassment that might rise to the level of sexual assault, it's a little bit different, obviously, because we are talking about potential criminal activity. Remember, the decision whether or not to report the incident to the police lies with the victim, not with the camp. And that, of course, you would be supportive of the victim in whatever he or she chooses to do. It is important, I would also have the victim go into the nearest town, wherever it is that you have arrangements, and undergo some form of counseling. That person needs to speak to somebody about the trauma that he or she may have faced so that they can process in the appropriate way and perhaps come back to camp or perhaps make a decision that that person needs to go home. When in doubt, and in any type of circumstances, my recommendation always is the perpetrator needs to be sent home. For the simple reason being that just like activity involving child sexual abuse, somebody's accused of activity which, if true, would prevent them from working at your camp until they're exonerated, they simply cannot be there. I would rather face a wrongful termination lawsuit from somebody who said you shouldn't have fired me than a lawsuit from a victim of a sexual assault who said my employer did nothing about it. In summary, it is important for each camp to check with its state and local rules and regulations to make sure that it is in compliance with any reporting and training mandates. We at AMSkier are always here to help and monitor these changes and report them to you as soon as we are aware of them. So thank you for joining us for this video. Call us if you need anything, and let's keep those children safe.